Speaking of social skills and team collaboration, you're as familiar with AAA and indies as they come. How have your experiences and expectations differed, having worked in both? And what are the big mindset shifts involved in these?
It's mostly political, actually. Sam, that's it's a very good question in the sense that after a couple of years at Ubisoft, I was like, okay, AAA industry, it's an ecosystem. Really, like it's a specific language process pipelines. It's an ecosystem, and it's fascinating. And to be put in parallel with what I've said before, with my approach of I want to learn more, I was like, okay, now I want to do the exact opposite direction, and I want to be in an indie studio that is shipping their first indie game using Unreal Engine 4, because back then I was starting learning Unreal Engine 4. And I was like, okay, that's a radical shift, and let's see how different it is. In my case, because it's very... everything that I'm saying there is to take with some chopsticks, in a sense that I'm just comparing two studios, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different studios with different stories out there. I'm just comparing my story with two studios, so chopsticks. But it was very interesting to see that it's pretty similar, actually, between the two of them. And I will take one simple example, because to me it really sticks my mind. It's just the knowledge is kind of the same. And I wouldn't break any NDA there, but there are some similarities, at least back then, between engine, the Snowdrop engine from Ubisoft and Unreal Engine 4 back then. But down to some like default textures that were being used. I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting because it's the same default texture, but how is it possible? And I was discovering SIGGRAPH papers. So SIGGRAPH is a very important conference for graphic engineers. And time to time, I was like reading those articles, and there were one of them about like interior parallax mapping, like to fake interiors for buildings, like windows of buildings, to fake interiors instead of modeling them. And that SIGGRAPH papers basically laid out the foundation of that method, but also provided a very small texture. And that texture was the one that I saw in Snowdrop engine, but also up to this day, even in Unreal Engine 5, you have that default texture, which is coming from that SIGGRAPH paper. So it was very interesting to see that even though I was switching company and the scope of the project from big AAA to very, very tiny indie, even if the engines were different, the people making these engines were maybe having the same teachers, or at least were using the same SIGGRAPH papers. The knowledge is basically shared. And that's this day I realized this, like, oh, actually, yes. It's not just as, like, it's a soup of knowledge, which is like kind of a planetary source of knowledge. And I was very like surprised how common that knowledge was. What was very different, though, was the very unique pipelines and process that fully depends on the company. And to some extent, you can eventually realize that most of the chaos that can come in and kicks in the production usually come from this, which is another topic, I guess.